Now, before we get into this week's episode, I have a very special announcement I'd like to share with you all. As my valued listeners, I wanted you to be the first to know about the inaugural Women and Wealth Catalyst Summit that I'll be hosting in 2025. I hope you'll join me and some other amazing women on March 27th at the Golden Gate Club in San Francisco for a full day of impactful sessions, including fireside conversations, intimate panels, and engaging discussions with values-aligned partners. Do not miss this opportunity to ignite your path to financial success and become part of a supportive network committed to achieving wealth. Reserve your spot today at women.win. That's right, ladies, women.win. And join us for a day that will shape your financial future. If you can't join us in San Francisco, be sure to stay tuned for New York City dates and venues soon to be announced. I can't wait to see you all there.
Welcome to Getting Rich Together, the show for successful women who are looking to take their financial futures to the next level. I'm your host, Shama Bunton. When I started my wealth building journey, nobody knocked on my door to give me all the answers. So I want to talk to the experts who've done it and bring the answers to you so we can discover the right opportunities that will help us achieve the financial futures we've always dreamed of together and have fun doing it. So let's dive into this episode and start getting rich together.
I am here today with the brilliant and beautiful Sathya Chey Patterson. Sathya, most people will know you for not only just the awards that you've won. It is no surprise to me that you were Top Women Advisors Best in State in 2023 for California and Best in State for Next Generational Wealth Advisors, also by Forbes, which is so profound. You are the founder of Arise, which is out here evangelizing the alignment of not just wealth, but wealth with values and empowering women to create a life of not just hypothetical abundance, but real, tangible abundance through connecting money and values. I am so excited to have you here today on Getting Rich Together. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Sathya, while I would love to just jump right in on what do we all do to get wealthy, there is a far more juicier, robust, emotional, heart-centered place to dive in here, which is where was this beautiful young girl, Sathya, born? What was life like for her growing up? Let's start talking about money as a young child.
My situation was a unique one. My birth story is that my family had just survived the Cambodian genocide that occurred in the late 70s in Cambodia. Both my parents lived through it. My older sisters and brothers, so I have two older sisters and a brother. You know, my sisters at 5 and 4 worked in child labor camps for a few years, separated from my mother. Can you imagine, being a mother and having your two daughters, 5 and 4 years old, work in child labor camps for 12 hours a day, being fed very little? So, I have that whole backstory to when my family lived in refugee camps for about 4 years, where I was born. And then shortly after I was born, we were able to come to America. We immigrated to Long Beach, which is the largest population of Cambodians outside of Cambodia, where I began, realizing all the plentiful opportunities that America gave to immigrants like my family, and what hard work, living within your means and investing wisely can build for you financial security and independence. Both of my parents retired in their 50s. So they've been retired. They're now in their early 70s, and they're living off of investment and real estate income and a little Social Security. And so, they achieved the American dream.
Wow.
They really did.
That's incredible, Sathya. So when you were growing up in Long Beach, what was it like for you? Were you visibly sort of aware of your financial circumstances growing up? Did your parents sort of shelter that from you? Were you eager to start working? How did you sort of incorporate this integration, right, of being in this new country? Your parents aren't from here. And here you are, right? Living in this different culture and environment. What was that like for you?
I wouldn't say they weren't able to shelter it because we all had to work. We all had to give our own contribution to the financial success of the family. My siblings who were in middle and high school, every morning they'd wake up before school, so 4, 5 a.m. in the morning, and we'd go around and collect recycled cardboard and cans out of trash cans. And my parents, after dropping them off at school, would go to the recycling centers to exchange that for money. My mom started to, she saved enough money to buy a sewing machine. So she started sewing clothes in the bulk for, different manufacturers. And so I would sit on the ground in her pile of material and sit, because there was no childcare. And I remember watching her sew clothes. And then we eventually opened up one of the first Cambodian supermarkets in the Long Beach area. So when I could stock shelves, I was stocking shelves,
Wow.
So I always knew how much sacrifice my parents gave to create a stable financial life for us. But I mean, we stayed in a 2-bedroom apartment with my family. We have 7 people, right? My parents are 2. We have five children, and they still rented out the other room to someone else.
Wow.
So we slept in the living room and the 1 bedroom. So there was always this consciousness around how we spent our hard-earned money, and that we always knew the work it took to make that money.
Mm. And when you were in high school, were most of your jobs then sort of within the family ecosystem of the work that they were asking you to do to help with their businesses? Were you working in other places? How did you sort of allocate your time?
So most of my teen life, as soon as I could stock shelves, I did in our family business, which ranged from a supermarket to kind of a local bodega type place where you sold pots and pans to toys to groceries and beer and wine, liquor stores, and then ultimately at a used car dealership my family had. So I did all the in-house financing. So we did our own financing when people purchased cars, and I would do the credit underwriting and everything like that.
Wait, how old were you doing credit underwriting?
At that time, I was 19.
Oh my gosh. That is so incredible. So, I mean, I feel like it's a whole another podcast episode as to how on
Yeah,
earth did like all of that go down and how did
I
you
know.
guys end up doing that, which is so incredible.
Yeah, it's wild. I mean, and, you worked at the cash register. Once I could count money, I worked at the cash register and saw, then we would have to go to the wholesalers and buy the inventory and see how you marked up the prices on the goods that you sold and the profit and loss of all that. So, and as a child, you're learning that unconsciously, right? You're just seeing it happen. And, so it was a very diverse childhood. And then once I got into 17, 18, I did work at my family dealership, but then I wanted to break off and do my own thing. So I worked for a telemarketing company that was trying to build online modeling portfolios for people. I tried hostessing too in college because I didn't want to work in the family business, but eventually circled back, and that's when I joined the car dealership.
I love
But I tried a
that.
little bit of everything.
I love that. And so obviously you were heavily involved in finance before you even decided to study finance in university. It sounds like it was just very integrated with it's so fascinating. It's like it's so integrated with this like bootstrapped heavy entrepreneurial, upbringing where it's like if we're going to make it, we're going to make it on our own and we're going to build things and create things. And it's such an interesting way to grow up, and what interesting and like fun signaling for you as you're going, oh, like this is how this works, or like, oh, I really can sort of create and do anything, or like anything is truly possible. So going into university then and deciding to study finance, was probably a no-brainer, but was there anything else you had considered at that time? And sort of what was the thought process around that?
No, there wasn't really much else in that as I was getting older, I saw how many Americans were living paycheck to paycheck, how many people were struggling with money, right? And I never struggled with money, even though it's not that. I mean, my family owned businesses, but no one was owning, a Fortune 500 company, right? We had enough because we learned to live within our means, and we saved a portion of those small earnings that we did make. And you lived a comfortable lifestyle because of that. And as I got older, I saw so many Americans living paycheck to paycheck, stressed out, saying, I can't pursue these things I love to do because I'm stuck in this job, golden handcuffs, for example, or I'm not spending time with my family because I need to put food on the table, right? And I wanted to have a career where I could take the things that I learned very organically as a child, the core tenets of how you create wealth, and help others with that aspect of their lives so that they can say, okay, I'm meeting with Sathya. She's my advisor. She's got a plan for me. This is if I do X, Y, Z, now I'm free to take that stress off my plate and pursue the career that I want. Maybe I want to get out of corporate America and start this business. Okay, Sathya, let's start planning. Okay, how do I start this company? Or instead of always working overtime and trying to jump in your career saying, hey, if you only make X amount of money, you have more free time to spend with your family. But having the information you need to make wise decisions around your finances that only not just impact the bottom line, but impact your balance in life, and what we say really does matter. Because even people who are so focused on the monetary number, there's often more emotional reasons why we do that, right? It's
Sure.
ego. It's I want to be seen as a great it's not the money.
Absolutely. And so I guess when you were first sort of starting off in this realm of finance, both educationally and then going into it as a profession, I imagine there were so many interesting moments for you as you were learning about the psychology of other people and then also ultimately learning about your own psychology, right? How you make financial decisions, what's important to you, what your values are around that. But ultimately what I think is so fascinating sometimes is, when you're working in finance and you're supporting and managing other people's money, it's obviously different than managing your own, right? And so there's a different sort of lens on that. As you were approaching graduation from university and you were off sort of into the working world, what were some of the things that you were able to do for yourself, right? Were you automatically investing in a 401k, right? When you got into this first job, were you able to make enough to save any money? How did you sort of start to get yourself on your footing as a young woman?
Yeah. So in my normal habit of making things way harder for myself than they need to be, in my sophomore year of college, I had a baby. So by the time I graduated college, my daughter was around 2 years old. So when we talk about was I able to save money into a 401k? Yes, I did. I did the minimum amount that I needed to, probably about 5% that I needed to get the employer match. I still prioritize that. But now I had an additional responsibility of making sure I had money for childcare, that I, worked for an employer that helped, my employer at the time helped to pay for some childcare expenses. So there was that whole other factor that I had to think about when I started working that many folks when they were 22 did not have to think about.
Absolutely. And talk about an acceleration of
Yeah.
this is not only just a woman with a vision, this is a woman with a vision and a sense of urgency as far
Yeah.
as I gotta get this done. And also what a great sense of responsibility as well in terms of needing to focus down and figure out what is really important to me. I've heard from so many women that having their first child was the first moment where they were like, wow, all of a sudden everything becomes really clear as to my values and, what it is that I am working for or what it is that I'm going to say yes to doing and no to doing. And so it's such a great experience to have that so young because it gives you that sense of clarity that I think is often not afforded to people until later. So how interesting. Like
Absolutely.
what a fascinating way to move through those
Yeah.
early young years of yours. And so as you were progressing through your career, at what point were you able to then sort of become, let's call it a bit more financially active, starting to look at other
Right.
kinds of investments, the broad spectrum of things? When did that start to open up?
Well, I think, in the spirit of what my parents taught me in terms of being as efficient as possible with the money you were making, right? So I started my first job making $34,000 a year. Now I was engaged at that time and we were a dual income household, but he wasn't making much more than me. So we did prioritize savings for our first home. Unfortunately, by the time that happened, my ex and I had split up, separated. And so I still was able to buy my first home at age about 26 years old. Yes, yeah. So, I mean, along the way, even though I was young, even though I was making $34,000 a year, even though I was a mother, I was absolutely diligent about at least saving a small percentage to my 401k and saving towards that goal of owning a home.
That's just so incredible, Satya. Like it's incredible to see sort of the diligence that you've applied to creating security and stability and starting to like put those building blocks. I think sometimes life is like Tetris, and you get the thing and you're trying to make it fit. And all of a sudden you've made a bunch of right decisions and now you're able to sort of move on to the next level. How did you decide? And at what point did you decide that working for someone else was no longer going to be the right move for you? When did you decide to sort of put your time and attention, and what were the things that ultimately ended up falling into place for you to say, okay, I now feel secure. I feel like I have not only the foundational and sort of proof, if you will, that I'm great at what I do, which is certainly needed to be entrepreneurial, but then also you encompass with this not just what traditional private wealth management firms do. The way that you approach things is also really unique. So talk to me a little bit about what on earth happened to get you to this magical place.
Yeah, so I worked for a small, now relative terms, $2 billion private investment wealth management firm for 12 years of my career. And that did allow me to wear a lot of hats. I learned how they ran the company decisions around growing a wealth management practice. I was able to step right in and work with high net worth individuals, which had complex family situations, divorce, death, family fights, and selling businesses, growing businesses. So that was a very helpful thing, and why, some kids that want to come out of college and immediately get the freedom of starting on their own business, that's all great. But there is this benefit of working with in the corporate America or for another company that would afford you these learning experiences while giving you stability of a salary, which I needed as a single mother. And so I was really blessed to have that. But eventually I was feeling like, hey, I'm a very hard worker. I commit a lot of time to my clients, given the great responsibility I have as a wealth advisor. And I just have a very strong work ethic. And I was feeling like, hey, I really want a seat at the table. I want ownership. And there just wasn't that space for me where I was at. So I went out and found it. I complained and I was unhappy with where I was in my career for 2 years, but I felt stuck being a single mother. Can I take this risk? I don't know. I needed time to save some emergency reserves, all those things. But I believe I did manifest and put into place, ultimately meeting my business partner, Steve, now at that time. And then we joined forces. And that's what allowed me to launch my company Arise. And most importantly, I wanted to build a firm right from the start that from the moment a client engages with us, there is that focus that wealth, I love this quote, wealth is the ability to fully experience life. It's not a number. It's something so unique to everyone. And of course, you need financial assets to do the things you want to do. I mean, we live in the real world, but I want to get to the core of what do you really need to be happy and live a fulfilled life.
So tell me, as far as launching a business it's a big investment, right? It's taking risk on yourself and making a really thoughtful, conscientious decision around that. And certainly you strike me as someone who's thoughtful, planned, and will say, okay, I'm in the right place and I'm going to make this decision. How did you sort of look at your finances up until that point? You started to talk about having an emergency savings account. Were you looking at, 6-month emergency savings? I have money in the stock market. My 401ks are going. What's going on with real estate? Like, what was the financial pie looking like for you as you decided to take on this sort of risk?
Yeah, well, I definitely made sure I had 6 months of living expenses saved up. I made sure to make sure I had a line of credit that I could access in case things weren't flowing and working out the way that I would hope to as quickly as I wanted them to. And at that point, we knew that a lot of our clients, both my partner and I, were loyal enough to us that when we left our previous firm, that they would join us at a rise. So how it works in the wealth management industry, there isn't a non-compete, so to speak, and I know they're not really valid in California, in that as soon as you resign with one firm, the next day you can walk away with the client's name, phone number, and address. You can mail them a letter. You can pick up the phone and say, hey, we just resigned here. We started this new company. Will you come join us? And this is why you should join us, why we left, et cetera. And the clients make that decision, and about 97% of them made that decision to join us. And then there is some ramping up time, and we moved over 3 of our full-time staff members. So, we just needed to make sure we had operating reserves to be able to float that before client assets ultimately transferred and we were generating revenue on those clients that moved over.
Wow. So did you guys sit down and say, okay, we're each going to capitalize this business with a certain amount of money and sort of,
Yeah.
okay, that's so.
Yes. And also the firm that you join, when a wealth advisor leaves one firm and joins another, that new firm, ours being LPL Financial, will give you a bonus to say, if we'll give you an upfront X amount of dollars that will help you get through this transition period. And if 90% of your clients move over, you'll get the rest of that bonus. But they, in essence, give us a little bit of an interest fee, a loan right out the gate to help us have a little bit more confidence about making the switch.
I love that. That's so exciting. And so as far as starting to look at then ramping up the firm and starting to then get back into the realm of paying yourself, and sort of like, okay, now we're in growth mode again. There's like big new financial heights you guys are reaching towards. There's business operations. There's essentially this entire entity is now, a whole new thing that needs to be nurtured, cultivated, and grown. So as you've been sort of looking at the development and growth of Arise, and then also looking at your own sort of value shifting, right? And sort of entering into this new phase of life, what has changed for you? How has your perspective on managing your own finances, or the things that are important to you, how has life sort of helped your values and things change over time?
I think, immigrating to this country with nothing and then becoming a single mother, right? Always living in survival mode, always being, kind of that franticness and that desperation of, I got to make sure I have enough to pay my bills and support my family. As I've gotten to a much more comfortable financial place, now it's constantly reminding myself I don't need to be in that state of that survival state that comes along with it, this anxiety and franticness, allowing myself to be much more present and conscious with how I spend my time
How have you
and
done
ultimately
that?
how I spend my money.
Yeah. How
Huh?
have you approached that, Satya? Like how have you been able? I mean, it's such a gap that I think so many women step into eventually, which is I grew up in this way, which was, let's say stressful and childhood traumas around things. And now I'm actually physically in a different place. Your children ostensibly won't have the same experiences as you did, right? So very different. And then also you are still you, right? And yet your environment, circumstances, and everything has changed. So, what is some of the work that you've done in order to help bridge that and in order to fully step into the woman who you are now?
Well, I talk about this concept about building success and soul alignment, right? Where what you're doing, there's this sweet spot of what you're doing and your passions and strengths, that intersection of it, right? And how I make decisions that are based in what's aligned with my soul is comes from self-reflection, self-actualization, right? Understanding what do you value and also what those traumas are, right? Because I also use the expression happiness is a choice. So when you are aware of those childhood traumas or those views around money, or I've been in survival mode and I don't need to be working from that state anymore. I can turn off the computer. The emails will be there tomorrow. Let me focus on my family, right? Those are internal dialogues that I'm having with myself on a daily basis. So I think the key to doing that is spending some time in self reflection and self awareness, recognizing those biases and traumas, and then making a conscious effort to make healthier decisions.
I think that's really powerful. In your work as a wealth manager and working with lots of successful women and women who are growing their portfolios, what are some of the things that you've not only noticed during their time of working with you, because I'm sure that's quite a emotionally profound experience. Not many wealth managers will espouse sort of living with spiritual alignment and soul alignment. So that is a juicy and unique perspective. But what are some of the things that you've noticed in them? And then also, what have you been learning? I feel like it's also this like beautiful give and take in relationship. You get to see and understand humans from this very deep personal perspective, and yet also get to make an impact.
Right. So for my women clients, who are maybe the breadwinner or 50-50 partner, but they're just as engaged in the financial dialogue as their male counterparts are. I find that there's often a much more emotional connection with money and how it's spent and their goals, right? I often need to phrase the decisions they're making and showing them the emotional or lifestyle impacts of it rather than um, a dollar number, a tangible number. I think that's much more noticeable in women. I think there's just overall a lot more anxiety around money with women. And I think a lot of that is just gender roles. And typically, maybe the daughters aren't exposed to the financial side as much as the sons are. And so when we're not very confident in things, in topics, we just shy away from them. We don't really want to talk about them because they make us anxious. So there's this reluctance to talk about money or have my meetings. I'm like, hey, we're due for our annual review. Let's talk about it. Let's make sure we're still on the right path. Sometimes I get a struggle with that.
And also, what have you been learning for yourself? How have you been changing?
In my conversations with my female clients, I really try to get to the core of what is their legacy they want to leave behind, what is the lifestyle they want I always, what do you want your day to look like, right? Whether now or in retirement, if I'm helping them grow in their career or grow their business or sell their business, right? Those conversations first start with, what do you want your day to look like? I think approaching that first helps me then navigate the legal and financial and all the other real world strategies that we need to employ, but stem from ultimately, that lifestyle or that emotional goal.
I love that. So as you're sort of looking at, what you're creating in this world and the impact that you want to have, do you see yourself retiring like your parents at 50? Is there a different kind of vision that you have in terms of the legacy and how it is you're looking to create impact?
50 is not that far away, so no, probably not. I I love what I do. It is my dharma. It's my life's purpose. Is to help people create the life of their dreams. To give them the confidence that they can do the things they love with the people they love. And I love that about my job. I can't believe I get to do that. I would love to help more people. So I don't think I'd retire. I think I'd definitely be more big picture. I'm really in the weeds now, being everything, the operations person and the person who does payroll, as well as manage and talk to clients and grow the business and all those things. I'd like to focus more on helping more people and growing my company so that I have more people giving advice from the perspective that I have towards money and growing wealth and achieving sustainable success.
I love that. What I also would love to double click on is sort of what conversations about money are like at home today. Obviously, you grew up in a really different environment than that of your children and where your family is now. So, as far as like how you have these conversations at home, talk to your eldest about, money and how to spend it or ways to think about it. What does it look like today? How do you guys have these conversations?
Yeah, well, I think the best thing you can do for children, and there's research around it, incorporating them in the household chores and decisions that are being made. So they get some sense of, contribution to the household, and that builds confidence. So I definitely, since my daughter was little, because we were, I was a single mom and we were a team. You're just as responsible for certain chores around the house or your money and what I give to you, and that's it. So we always had this very open dialogue about her contribution and how she spent her money. It's funny because with my husband, we had a different upbringing, of course. And one thing I always encourage my clients to talk to with their spouses is, what is their love language for spending?
Mhm.
So we've heard about the love language book. There's acts of service, verbal affirmations, physical touch, right? But there's a love language for spending. Do you like gifts? So you want things, right? Do you like quality time? So you enjoy experiences, vacation, weekend getaways, acts of service. Maybe you would rather pay for convenience and a maid, a car wash, those type of things that help you live a more convenient life. And then physical touch. Maybe you enjoy things that provide more comfort, massages and things like that. So when a couple is aligned with how they're spending their money, there's that less friction, or there's that conversation about, these really things are really important to me, and therefore that's why I choose to spend. And there's trade-offs, right? Unless you have an endless trust fund that you're spending from, every choice that you make and spending money you spend, that's something that you can't spend elsewhere. So my husband and I make sure we understand what we value and know that we're making a trade-off to be able to spend money on those things. My husband also has the stance of, hey, once I save 25% of my income, the rest is fair game. I'm spending it on whatever I want. And me, because of that immigrant, I think, mindset, I'm like, well, I saved 25%. How can I save 35%? So I think another thing when you say, how has my mindset around money evolved, is being okay with saving 25%, which is a great savings figure, and saying, okay, maybe I can treat myself a little bit more instead of now scrimping even harder to save even more. I tell my clients too, if you're not flying first class, your kids will be.
I love that. So on this topic of spending, I'd love to hear your spending love language and and how you satisfy that. What are the ways in which you love to spend your money?
Definitely quality time for me, experiences, right? So I'm a firm believer in having separate bank accounts, and one for your emergency cash reserves, your checking where you get your, flows, paycheck in and out, paying your bills, etc. And then maybe a goal savings account. So mine is towards travel. So I always make sure that I'm saving a little bit of my paycheck towards my travel budget. And I love learning about cultures and history. And I think you remember most, your children, you and your spouse often remember those new memories you make exploring and traveling. So definitely experiences.
I love that so much. It's, I think it's probably the number one thing that I hear on the show is how much people love to just enjoy and expose themselves to new environments, new people, like new places. It's such a wonderful time in the world that we live in where we can access those things very easily. It's
Right.
like really, even though it's still a pain in the butt to fly on some of these airlines, we're still very lucky that we get the privilege to go places. So Satya, as you are sort of looking to build out your practice, your impact, what are some of the things that our community can do to evangelize, be a part of, and support what it is that you're doing?
Well, definitely, if you want to learn more about my practice and what we do, ariseprivatewealth.com is the name of my website. I'm also on LinkedIn and Facebook and Instagram. You can find me. I'm sure you'll link the call notes. I am working on a book ultimately that will discuss wealth, achieving success, and that soul alignment piece that I was talking about, because I think there's just, especially with motivated, driven, high achieving women, right? You often get in these situations where you want the title, you want the dollar, the figure, the salary, the stock options, etc., and you still feel restless and unfulfilled. And so I want to talk more about that consciousness around how we spend our time and money and aligning it with what your innate abilities and passions are, what you can do to work more in that flow state, right? Where time fades and you just are in your zone of genius. More of that, please.
Yes.
That's where we feel alive. And coming from my background and feeling so fortunate that I am alive, that is driven why I'm in wealth management. That's driving the impact and legacy I want to make in this world is coming back to that.
Well, you beautiful soul, Satya. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for being here today. What a delight. How inspirational. I am so excited for your book to come out. And thank you for sharing your spirit with us here on the show. I appreciate you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Getting Rich Together. Please take a minute to subscribe. And if you like this episode, I'd love it if you could share it with a friend who is ready to elevate their financial future. Until next time, let's keep getting rich together.